skills. This session is focusing on the importance of partnership working in adult basic skills provision. And I think we've heard from some of the discussions in the first session that, you know, it's not necessarily enough just to have the availability of fully funded or free English and maths courses. There's a whole set of wider support that's needed there to encourage people to engage and participate in learning. And one of the things that we think is a way of doing that is for adult education providers to work closely in partnership with other public services and other organisations to really sort of build those connections, referral routes and so on. And that's something that we've looked at quite a lot in our work in recent years. We produce guidance on partnership working in ESOL provision, and we've also been more recently looking at partnerships in basic skills and also around health and basic skills and the role of social prescribing from health workers, link workers into adult learning provision. So what we've got for you in this session this morning is three short, sharp inputs on different aspects of partnership working in basic skills, and then we'll have some time for discussion, comments and questions afterwards. If you would like to ask a question at any point, please do type things in the chat and we'll try and pick that up at the appropriate moment. But we will have some space at the end where if people would like to, hopefully you can raise your hand using the raise hand function and maybe come on camera and mic to ask your question in person. So to introduce our speakers, and we've just been discussing before the session started that with all of our contributors are called Catherine or some variant on that. So I'm going to have to be really careful not to get muddled up, and also we may be rather formally having to refer to people by their full name as well, just so that we make sure that the questions go to the right person and so on. But first up, I've got my colleague Kat, who is going to talk about a little bit about the work that we've been doing on basic skills partnerships and what the ingredients are in partnership working between basic skills providers and other public services. We're then going to hear from Catherine James, who's one of our associates who's been working with us looking at supporting referral from health services through social prescribing into adult learning provision. And then we're going to hear from Catherine Hemmings at MESH, which is the Migrant English Support Hub in Yorkshire and the Humber. And we know that in ESOL provision, there's been a lot of interest in and development of referral mechanisms and provider partnerships that are joined up with other local partners and stakeholders to make sure that ESOL learners can navigate what's a very complicated landscape of eligibility and provision, and hopefully find a provision that is best suited to their needs. And Catherine's going to talk to us a bit about the partnerships that they work in to achieve that and the partnerships that they'd like to develop further in future. So we've got a really packed agenda. So I'm going to hand straight over to Kat, who's going to talk us through a sort of overview of some of the key considerations and the ingredients that need to be in place to support partnership working for adult basic skills. So Kat, over to you.
Thank you, Alex, and thank you everyone for joining today. So as Alex mentioned, for adult basic skills provision, people often need support to help them access provision. People often face barriers to access, and those can be things like people hiding their basic skills needs due to stigma, or their negative self-beliefs, or maybe negative experiences of education in the past, isolation, but also basic skills needs can function as a barrier in themselves. In literacy needs or ESOL needs in particular can prevent someone from searching for provision, signing up for courses themselves. So those are the kind of starting point and the reasons why we have been doing research looking into how people can be supported to access basic skills provision, and how in particular public services can be involved in supporting people to access basic skills provision. So for this research, we've spoke with a wide range of stakeholders and public services, including local authorities, job centre pluses, national career services, housing associations, libraries, schools, healthcare stakeholders through social prescribing route, and my colleague Catherine will speak about that in more detail. And also stakeholders like community organisations. And the first and maybe the most important thing that we found is that across public services, there's consistent high awareness and recognition of basic skills needs, especially around among stakeholders on frontline. When you speak to people in public services, they immediately think of examples they can give you of when they have recognized basic skills needs in people. So there's this high awareness, and also stakeholders across public services consistently bring up how relevant the basic skills agenda is to various areas of their service delivery. So if it's health, for example, and it's health literacy and people being able to read their prescriptions and look after their health. If it's schools, then it's supporting children's education. So stakeholders across public services really recognize how relevant basic skills are to their area of work and what they do. Some referrals do happen from wider public services to basic skills provision. Where they do happen, we see that mostly they happen on an informal basis and are based very much on individual relationships between organizations at community levels. And basic skills needs are identified in service users also on an informal basis through established relationships, through having conversations. So when we spoke to public services about how they currently identify basic skills needs and support people to access basic skills learning provision, we have found a lot of challenges, but the main challenges are summarized here. So discussing basic skills needs and referrals with someone can be very challenging from a public service perspective. So we were told a lot that if a person has developed various coping mechanisms throughout their lives to hide their basic skills needs, then starting that conversation can be very challenging, and public services tend to not have resources or training that's specific to this issue on how to recognize signs of basic skills needs, or how to refer people to learning provision, or start having this conversation with them about their options and benefits of learning basic skills. The only kind of exception to that is job centre plus stakeholders, who tend to have some training on this, but wider public services generally don't have training or resources on this. Capacity, kind of not surprisingly, is a big challenge. Public services are, of course, very busy on day-to-day basis with their normal day-to-day jobs, and often have limited time with customers. So in that time, recognizing and discussing basic skills needs requires time to establish relationships and establish trust and really get to know a person, which can be challenging in that limited time, where other priorities and other needs also need to be addressed. So in that context, some public services would tell us that even if they would see that it would be useful for someone maybe to access basic skills learning provision, just having those other priorities and this conversation being so challenging can stop someone from having this conversation with a person about them going on to learning. Knowing what learning provision is available is often a challenge if there aren't resources on this. Most public services do not have access to databases or tools for searching for learning provision, and communication between public services and learning providers was also identified. So in areas such as finding out what provision is available or following up on outcomes of referrals. If there aren't established processes for this, then it can be challenging. But we've also, through this research, identified not only challenges, but opportunities as well, things that do work well in referrals from public services to basic skills learning provision. And from that, we've developed a kind of model for basic skills referrals that was developed on addressing the challenges that were identified and highlighting some opportunities that do exist. So this model of referrals from public services to basic skills learning provision can require action on various levels. So that's regional or combined authority level, local authority level, and neighborhood levels. On a regional level, MCAs have a broad overview of AEB delivery and strategic insights into local basic skills needs. And they can also shape basic skills delivery through AEB commissioning and work to create coherence between offers of adult basic skills and other services. On local authority level, local authorities may be well placed to kind of lead or coordinate partnerships between public services and basic skills provision, and facilitate that information sharing about learning that's available and maybe how referral process could work. And on neighborhoods level, organizations really can establish those relationships and share information about their offer and what they do to have those relationships running smoothly and enable referrals between each other. So this is the model that we've developed based on this research that includes specific activities and enablers that can support greater involvement of public services in referring adults to basic skills learning. Information sharing on basic skills provision is essential to kind of close any gaps in information, and that can include providing mapping exercises to understand what provision is available and for public services to have access to these mapping exercises through infrastructure to share courses and other information. So that could be websites, directories, which would include kind of up-to-date information on learning provision and also promote greater awareness of interconnectedness of basic skills and other outcomes. Promoting opportunities to learn is another important activity that was identified that could be done through coordinated outreach activities between learning providers and public services, and those could be targeted to specific contexts of public services or specific cohorts. So say if it's done with schools partners, then it could be targeted on looking into how basic skills learning can support help people to support their children's learning, for example. And opportunities for learning providers and wider public services to network and to get to know each other and build those relationships can also support greater involvement in referrals. Then specific referral mechanisms and channels could be developed further to support greater involvement of public services in referring people to basic skills learning provision. So things like adopting a single point of contact or no wrong door policies. Things like co-location of services was identified as really helpful in facilitating referrals. So we found where there's this proximity between a learning provider and a public service, then referrals can work really smoothly. So things like having adult learning provider staff at the public service location, or even having delivery at a location of a public service like a school or a housing association, which is a familiar context for people. So that helps to reduce some of those barriers in accessing learning, where someone can feel maybe not confident enough to go into a new venue or a college, but in a familiar settings with those established relationships, that can be really helpful. This already happens in some contexts, and where it does happen, we see that it can be really helpful in facilitating more effective referrals. Then other specific enablers that we found could include things like promoting local partnerships and networks. Those can be either general or focused on specific skills like digital ESOL partnerships, or they can be focused on specific services like social prescribing networks. Those kind of networks can be effective vehicles for delivering many other activities that have been identified. Developing things like materials for training for wider public services about basic skills needs and about how to start conversations with people about specific basic skills needs can be also really helpful. And we found that there's a lot of interest in that amongst wider public services. Many stakeholders say that it would be useful to see those kind of resources, but those need to be quite detailed and tailored to specific context of their delivery. So I see I'm starting to slightly take some time from my other colleagues, but would love to hear your reflections on any of this later when we have the discussion.
Thank you very much, Kat. And I think some people have been starting to reflect on that already, because I can see a couple of comments in the chat talking about how do you manage issues like turnover of staff, and so having to recreate those relationships over and over again if you don't have sort of more formal relationships and structures in place, and also how do you get through even to the right person in the right service at the same time. So we're going to move on swiftly now to looking at the links between health and basic skills provision, and how there is a role for social prescribing. And I can see there's a question about social prescribing, which I'm going to ask Catherine to answer in her presentation, but how initiatives like social prescribing, where people are referred from health practitioners into learning, can contribute to boosting participation in learning. So let's go straight over to Catherine James now, and welcome, Catherine, and over to you.
Thank you, Alex, and thank you, Kat. So I'm Catherine James, and I'm Associate for Learning and Work Institute, and I've been working with Alex and Kat and Asley at Learning Work on a project that we've been doing around social prescribing to adult basic skills. So what I want to talk today is a bit about what is social prescribing, and through the work that we've done, kind of what works and what are the challenges to this. A lot of what I say will just reiterate some of the things that Kat has just said, but we have seen some examples of really good practice, and that's kind of also what I want to share with you. Before I go on, I just want to kind of just revisit, if you like, what is the link between health and well-being and basic skills. So basic skills can impacts on health and well-being through a series of mediators. As Kat said, it's kind of health literacy stuff, being able to understand health information, access it, understand it, etc. Through friendship and social connectedness, through control over your life, through kind of a sense of hope that life can get better, and the kind of opening up of, if you like, of opportunities for you. Just to kind of give you some data on that, so some research that was undertaken by Learning and Work on the impact of basic skills on health and well-being. So the 43% of adults who we know that don't have an adequate literacy fail to understand health information, and that rises to 68% when numeracy is involved. And 68% of adults not proficient in English, 65% report good health, and that is compared to 88% in the general population. So health and wellbeing is much lower among people with poor basic skills, low basic skills, through a series of kind of mediators. And it's really important, I think, for us to hold on to that. So what is social prescribing? So the NHS England have made a commitment through their universal kind of personalised care that in 2021 there would be an appointment of 1,000 new social prescribing link workers, and with a target that by 2023-24 900,000 people would be referred for social prescribing. So what it is when people turn up often at their GP surgeries, or maybe it can happen through other ways, for instance if they are a present at A&E, and actually what happens is that their health need is actually not a medical health need, it's much more of a social need. And so they should be referred through social prescribing, and a social prescriber, often called a link worker, but sometimes called a community connector or a navigator, will then connect that person to activities that will make a difference to them. And it's about helping people find a sense of purpose and, if you like, enjoyment in their lives. So dealing with some of the things which are impacting on their health and well-being. And so link workers, social prescribers, are very much seen to have to work in partnership in the community. But as Kat has already said, there are many, many challenges to this. You're absolutely right. One of them is turnover of staff. That's another issue that needs to be addressed. But also what we find is that for a lot of social prescribing link workers, what they have to do, first of all, is deal with some of the essential matters that people are facing, and whether that's around things like housing or finance. And that was exacerbated through COVID, where a lot of link workers were finding that they were just doing things like getting people shopping, getting their medication. They also work in a very boundaried way with people, so they often have a kind of caseload or a referral just for 6 weeks. So within 6 weeks, they have to move somebody on to another service. There are positive reasons for that, but and a lot of them will obviously have a kind of degree of flexibility. The other thing is that, and through the recruitment, is that a lot of the link workers may have a limited understanding of adult education. They come from a whole range of backgrounds, and while they might be familiar, as we know and hear this all the time, they may be familiar with schools and universities, they have very little understanding of kind of FE colleges, and even less of adult education. So if you kind of think about their priority is often essential stuff like housing and finance, then coupled with their lack of awareness around adult education, referring somebody to adult education isn't necessarily high on their to-do list with people. So they might even find it quite difficult to even talk about it, might not even think to talk about it, etc. So one of the things that is a challenge, I think, for us is to think about how do we raise that awareness that Kat was talking around with social prescribing link workers and services about what adult education and adult basic skills providers can do for their client group. So partnerships working is absolutely key. It doesn't just happen. It's not just enough just to have your service there. We have to actually be much more proactive about building those strong partnerships based on trust and shared understanding. And I think it's also important to recognise that this has to be something which isn't just about a named contact person within an organisation. And though that is really important, it has to permeate throughout the whole organisation. So as adult basic skills providers, it has to be at a much more kind of managerial leadership level as well. So that person making initial contacts, being at the right meetings, organising, if you like, the kind of visits, information sharing with leadership in those kind of services around whether it's in voluntary sector or GPs or mental health services. The reason that's important, I think, is also because it helps with that revolving door, because it's actually it becomes much more embedded in the service rather than embedded in the knowledge and skills of just one person. But it also is about, I think, the freeing up of some of the resources that is needed to this. And I said there, the kind of allocation of resources, recognise that actually partnership working takes time to build up. It does require people, so often the appointment of a named person, a named contact is really important, so that person kind of does, if you like, the bulk of the legwork around this and the building of the relationships once that strategic partnership is in place, that they are sufficiently trained to be able to work with the kind of client group that will be referred through social prescribing, but actually all staff are trained across the organisation. That's really important because I think that is about building trust with kind of health and social care providers and voluntary sector, that when they refer, people will be, we will work with people in a kind of appropriate way that will be health promoting, if you like, and not present any risks. And what I would also say is actually sometimes I think there's important to kind of co-train with people in other services, so that you are again developing that kind of trust and shared understanding. The other one, going back to, is think about what services are needed. So as Kat said, it is about sharing information, whether it's kind of leaflets or websites, etc. But that isn't enough. So that only has to be within a context of people kind of understanding what it means. So if people don't understand what adult education is or adult basic skills is, reading a leaflet doesn't always kind of do it. So it has to be backed up, I think, by kind of visits, getting to know people, etc. But also, more importantly, I think it's that understanding what is it they need for their clients. So not so much of a push agenda, but a pull agenda. How can we help you help your clients? And that's the kind of conversation that you need to have. Recognise that this all takes time to align those organisational values, build trust, etc. One of the successful projects that we worked with said that they felt it had taken 5 years to get to a position where they were taking those kind of referrals through. Then I think one of the things that we need to do is find ways to accelerate that partnership building, but it is recognising that this doesn't happen overnight and it does require lots of hard work. Measuring outcomes and ways of sharing data is another key important thing that we need to kind of bottom out. So social prescribing link workers were obviously judged on the number of referrals and placement, but actually some adult education and adult basic skills providers are measuring health outcomes, and whether that's through WEMWEBs or GAD7, PHQ9 or PCAT, it's about working with those services. What information could we provide for you that would help you, would demonstrate that this has health outcomes and is of value to people? Because while it's also important to think about the impact on individuals, actually behind all this is, of course, the need to take the pressure off GP surgeries of people keep turning up because actually what they are is lonely or they are depressed and feeling low. It's that client group that we're working with. So finding data which shows that basic skills provision impacts on that is a very powerful way to keep building those partnerships and making sure that it becomes embedded in services. So let's have a look at kind of what works in terms of the provision. The types of courses that we looked at were very much very successful ones, were the kind of wellbeing courses, so mindfulness, dealing with anxiety, exercise, for instance. Really excellent course done with one adult education provider, which was 10 practical ways to live a happier life. So that was a really important one. Outside courses, so gardening, walking, another provider does a plant lovers walk in a local park, and of course online and digital courses and lunchtime talks. And the digital courses very much introduced during COVID, but actually have been, we found had been very successful, because a lot of people finding it difficult to get out because of caring responsibilities or because they were shielding or because of particular health reasons, etc. So quick lunchtime talks on Zoom about health, getting professionals in to help you deliver those were also really successful, and also not just for adult education providers, but also helped health professionals reach their targets on contact. So again, co-creation and co-delivery of courses between these on developing the offer was really important. Health professionals actually enrolling onto your courses, so that 10 practical ways to live a happier life. People who refer onto that course actually do the course, and they do it alongside some of the learners, and that gave them a much better insight into the way that what the course covered, the way that it was facilitated, the way that it empowered people, and meant that when they talked about it, they could talk about it in a much more knowledgeable and enthusiastic way, which also helped to kind of build confidence in people accessing the courses. Lots of learners, providers sort of saying, well, actually you do this course, but come back and do refresher courses. So they would come back once a month after that to talk about how they had been managing their health, what they had done, their successes, and therefore also inspiring other people to keep going. But it also sustained that social connectedness that people had built up, and strengthened those kind of friendship bonds that people had developed through the course. Bringing back learners to act as buddies and mentors, so releasing the kind of power of the learner voice was it's really important, and helped to make courses more successful, and of course obviously through those wellbeing courses, embedding the kind of literacy and numeracy into those courses, so that people were learning in a kind of I suppose learning in lots of different ways about health and well-being, as well as improving their literacy skills, and of course creating those progression routes. So they did well-being courses, developed their literacy skills, numeracy skills, and then went on to literacy and numeracy courses, or to other courses or employment. So embedding it and creating those progression routes is really key. And I think that is all from me.
Thank you very much, Catherine. And there's some really interesting debates and comments now going on in the chat about how we achieve this kind of joining up. And I think there's some really interesting comments there about the language and the terminology, because I think you've got different sectors who have different terms there, but also what's the strategic driver to do any of this, I think was mentioned by Matthew there, which I know is something that came up in the research that we were doing. So I'm sure that lots of adult education providers would love to be working on these agendas, but nobody's actually telling them to do it. And if nobody's telling you to do it, how do you make the time and capacity and that kind of thing? But I think this is one of those areas where it gets really interesting now with the devolution of adult education funding, because some areas are putting more of a focus on that than others, or at least talking about it. But it remains to be seen whether they will actually use a proportion of their limited funding, and we know that funding is limited, listening to Claire earlier this morning, whether they will actually put that priority on say, for example, health and well-being, or will it go on skills and productivity or employment for and where does basic skills fit in with that? So lots of interesting issues raised there. I'm going to move straight on to Catherine Hemmings at Mesh now on a slightly different tack here, and she's going to talk about the importance of partnership working in ESOL provision, and how they join up with a range of partners to support access to English language learning in Yorkshire and in the Humber. So over to you, please, Catherine.
You're on mute, Catherine.
Unmute myself, screen share. Can you hear me now? Yeah, sorry, I just had to stop sharing because I couldn't see. Oh, there it was at the top. Anyway, I was saying, I just was going to reflect very briefly on the links between why I'm here and what Kat and Catherine were saying, I think, because there was a slide that Kat showed, I think it was her last one, with a blue box with activities written at the top, and it was talking about provision mapping, information sharing, promoting learning opportunities and networking. And I thought, okay, so we're kind of a case study of that, if you like, that we do all those things. So for those of you that don't know MESH, Migrant English Support Hub, it's been around in Leeds since 2013, and now is a regional organisation, and our objective is to list all the ESOL provision that is available in all the different local authorities in Yorkshire and the Humber, except North Yorkshire, on our website. And I'm not going to click on the links to the websites because A, I'm not sure that you'll be able to see them if I do that, and B, I don't think we've got time, but I've put them in the slides so that hopefully these slides will be distributed to the people that are attending, so you'll be able to have a look at our websites. So that's the first one there, find English classes in Yorkshire and the Humber. And to access that, you just put in your postcode or the name of the town where you are, how far you want to travel, click on search, and you'll be presented with a list of all the ESOL provision near you. That's accredited provision through colleges through to a conversation class in the community. We aim to list all provision. I don't think we're there yet, but there's a fair proportion up there. And that's been running for about 18 months, 2 years. And over time, we found we were adding information that was useful to providers, to tutors, to volunteers. And so we've got extra funding to create a second website, Learning English Plus. And on that website, it's information that's more targeted at tutors, providers, volunteers. So teaching resources, training opportunities, and what we've called a staff room where people can post news items, events that are upcoming, good news stories they want to promote, and so on. And both of these websites really have come about entirely through partnership working. So that's what I'm going to talk to you about. And there's kind of 2 levels of the partnerships. We're very closely linked into Migration Yorkshire, that is the strategic migration partner for Yorkshire and the Humber. And through that, we've had funding from all the local authorities across the region, because I think everybody could see the benefits of having a resource for the region where information about ESOL was listed. And through resettlement monies and Migration Yorkshire and MHCLG, and more recently AMIF, funding has come to mesh to develop the websites. That also gives us access to local authority contacts via the resettlement board, and the latter part of the project to develop Learning English Plus has been funded through a bigger project that Migration are operating called Refugee Integration Yorkshire and Humber, and that's funded through AMIF. So that's one kind of level of partnerships, if you like, at the strategic level, I suppose, within Yorkshire and the Humber, that we're kind of linked to those higher level ongoing developments. And also through that, we've developed some UK-wide links. For instance, I'm here today talking to this conference. I've also talked to partnerships in other areas who are interested in trying to develop a model for ESOL coordination along the lines of what we've been doing in Yorkshire and the Humber. So that's one level of partnerships. And then the other level that I think is probably, well, it's equally, if not even more important, is through our project advisory group. Now, MESH has been around since 2013, so that's quite a long time. We only became a charity in 2018. And before that, the project was kind of managed and directed by a bunch of interested individuals, initially just within Leeds. So that included people like Natekla and some of the main ESOL providers in Leeds, like Leeds City College, and some of the voluntary sector organisations like RETAS and LASAN, and also driven by academic research. Our chair of directors until very recently, James Simpson, had done research about the effects that the lack of ESOL coordination was having on learners in Leeds. So that kind of gave a credibility, if you like, his research to the need for this kind of coordination that the website was going to provide. And I think that that was really important in helping us to gain recognition with people like Migration Yorkshire and the local authorities, the funders, basically. Also involved in that project advisory group were people with a practical interest in the work that we were doing. For instance, the DWP Job Centre Plus, the local authorities who were providing services, and people like libraries where often ESOL learners congregate to be able to access the internet and things like that. So people from that very sort of pragmatic level were also able to feed into what we were doing and give a different perspective on their view of the needs of ESOL learners and how things needed to be shaped. And that helped at a really practical level to shape the website. We made amendments to how we were developing things based on the perspective that other people were giving us. And the project advisory group continues to be a really important driver behind the work that we do. So for instance, the Learning English Plus, the second website that we launched earlier this year, a couple of months ago, the things that are on there are really shaped by the information that we get from the project advisory group and their ideas and suggestions. So I think the benefits of the partnerships are really clear to hopefully to everybody that's involved in them, not just to us at MESH, in that access to the wide range of expertise and the different perspectives that I've mentioned, and different approaches to problem solving that, you know, bring together the creativity of a large bunch of people. It's really interesting that health and social prescribing is being talked about this morning, and I saw somebody talking about housing associations in the chat, because those are really two of the directions that we'd like to move in terms of involving people from those areas, making them aware of what we're doing and how there could be a mutual benefit there. And some of the challenges clearly have already been mentioned. The staff turnover in partner organisations. And I think that's where it really helps that we've got the project advisory group with somebody who's got quite a senior role within job centres in Leeds. And through that, we've had access to going to staff meetings to talk to staff about, take postcards, look, this is the website, this is how you can use it, this is how it's going to benefit you. And because they're part of the project advisory group, that helps us to kind of maintain those connections with those organisations. And then, of course, there are the unexpected challenges. Obviously, the biggest one of those in the last couple of years has been the pandemic. Now, setting up networking events for practitioners, for ESOL tutors and volunteers was always part of the original Learning English project. And we envisaged that that would be sort of 3 times a year, face-to-face, in Sheffield, in Leeds, in Hull. And we'd done 2, and then the pandemic happened. And so we switched over to online events. And also the importance of networking sort of grew as practitioners, tutors, volunteers, providers were all struggling to, like, how do we adjust to this new situation and the implications for ESOL. And we've sort of realised that there's a lot of advantages to working online in networking events, particularly when you're a regional organisation based across quite a wide geographical area. And bringing providers together and tutors together is enabled a sharing of information about ESOL need in different parts of the region, and also enables people in different parts of the region to make links with each other. And I think the regional scale has really helped some of the smaller areas of needs become more visible and recognised. You know, there's been ESOL learners in Sheffield, Hull and Leeds for a long time, but it's a much newer thing for Grimsby or Rotherham or Malton. Oh no, Malton's North Yorkshire, not Malton, Beverley. So it's a way of helping some of those smaller areas to develop their understanding, have access to that wider network through being in networking events with people from areas with more expertise. So I think that that's been really helpful as well. And then finally, this is an opportunity for networking. Learning English Plus consists of resources, news, events and training, not that just we put on there, but that other people let us know about, and will only be as good as that collective input. So if you've got any news, events or training that you'd like to share with us, then please do get in touch. There's a get in touch button on the website, and that's my email address, and we'd be really pleased to hear from you and include your information on the website. And yeah, partnership working is definitely hard work. It's not something that's ever done. It's one of those things that the minute you take your foot off the accelerator, everything stops moving. But I think there are massive benefits to doing it. And yeah, that's what I've got to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Catherine, and a really important final point there about how partnership working never stops, and you need to keep your foot on the gas. So that was a quick whistle-stop tour through a whole range of different partnerships and considerations, but we have managed to maintain a little bit of time for any comments or questions. I can see in the chat there that Deb has made some really important points around the working with housing associations on ESOL provision, and the really important work that communities that work do, and definitely worth getting in touch with them if you're looking to make links with housing associations. So we do have a bit of time to throw things open. So if you have any specific questions for Catherine or Catherine, and please try to indicate which one of those people you would like to ask a question to, then feel free to post those in the chat, or you can raise your hand electronically, and you'll find that in the participants chat. But we'd also be really interested to hear any further points that you might have, just generally. Which partnerships do you find the most effective, and who are you working with at the moment? Are the partnerships that you would like to develop further, like Catherine mentioned, around health and housing, are sort of on their wish list there? And if there are partnerships that you would like to develop further, what sort of support do you think is needed to help you do that? Because clearly there is a certain amount of time, effort, and barriers to be overcome there. So I don't know if anybody wants to volunteer to kick us off, or perhaps some of the people who've been very active in the chat would like to give us their take on things. Please do come in there if you want to. I don't know, so looking back through those comments, I don't know, Matthew, whether you'd like to come in and tell us a bit more about the point that you're making on the sort of strategic direction for this kind of activity.
Yeah, hi, Alex, Catherine, everybody, yeah, and everybody else. It's just a frustration, really. I think not just me is having. Lots of people seem to be quite confused about the driver. It's great making links with public servants, but who are you talking to there? Is it a director? Is it the people you want to be working with? And I suppose even in adult education itself, adult community learning, which we're in, or even FE, it's knowing the right people to link with, and those people change. Staff churn is across both organisations. So for me, it's a strategic operation. Adult social care is another good example as well, where we got on the cusp of making something really work from a strategic point of view. The idea was that we're going to get people to sit around the table from adult social care across the country almost as well, and make some real inroads into that, so we could help us locally in East London. But then some people left. There seems to be a bit of a mess in adult social care, and there's nothing that we could do, and we had to partner for a little bit as well. Of course, funding is something that we'd like more of, and I think funding is a big driver. Short projects, action research projects are great, and I love them, because with the small amount of money you can do quite a lot. So it doesn't have to be the big, all singing, all dancing, multi-million-pound bid. It can be a short bid where you can do a lot of, I think damage is the wrong word, but a lot of progress, make a lot of progress. You know what I mean? That's what I feel. Thanks.
No, thank you, Matthew. That's really helpful, and yeah, interesting point there about the funding and how it's used. And I thought it was encouraging what Claire said in the first session about thinking about putting some of their funding on a different set of outcomes rather than just about delivering qualifications, and perhaps looking at some of those being around, say, health rather than other things. And Deb has asked in the chat if she can ask a question regarding networking prior to need. Would you like to come on and ask that question, Deb?
Hello, can you hear me?
We can, yeah.
Good afternoon, or nearly afternoon. I wanted to ask about the approach, and I'm going to come in where Matthew mentioned about people disappearing, and you work very hard to establish links and network connections, and then it turns out they disappear overnight. So an awful lot of good work, and work that takes a lot of time and resources, becomes, well, useless, to be quite honest. I was also going to say that one of the things that we experience is, because we're incredibly busy, and as you would imagine, we've got a whole range of officers supporting a whole range of issues. We work very hard to build up these networks, but what we find is people often go, oh, the housing association will deal with this. They seem to think that because they ask, we will respond. The other side of that is, well, yes, but let's get to know you and actually get to trust what you're providing, get to look at the quality of what you're doing. Because the other thing is, we're not willing to set up our customers, our tenants, to fail. And what we're also do is we check the provision, and we get to know them. So we're not happy to just take referrals or refer out when we're not happy about the quality of that organisation. They often think, I found a name, tick, that's my box and my criteria fulfilled, and I'll roll them off my Teflon coated shoulders. And what we say is, no, we've been in this game. We've got a lot of people with a lot of experience and expertise, and you want to network, why not talk to us first before you actually have something you want? And I think there is a kind of arrogance with some organisations that because they ask, they will get, and then they often don't like hearing no. And I just want to throw that in, that we're really keen to help, and we work with lots of people, and we're all about the best outcomes for the person. But what we're not happy about is this constant, because I found you, now I can give up my work. And that doesn't work. That just produces a really confused individual, and we're not in that business.
Thank you very much, Deb. And I wonder whether I can just get a quick response from Catherine Hemmings on how, on your experience perhaps of managing some of those challenges and different levels of expectations and involvement, and whether you have any practical experience of doing that.
Well, I think my initial response is that I think because MESH started from the point of view of identifying the need for some sort of coordination of ESOL across Leeds as a city, there was no easy way to find out where provision was. And because MESH, and I wasn't around at the time, I only joined the organisation a couple of years ago, but from 2013 until 2019, when they got the funding from Migration Yorkshire, I think it really was a question of working at the ground level, talking to ESOL providers. And I think I mentioned the academic research that James had done from the University of Leeds, that he'd gone out into one of the neighbourhoods in Leeds, Hare Hills, where there's high levels of ESOL learners, and really drilled down into that and identified what the issues were. So I think there was a lot of credibility behind what the organisation was doing from the outset, really, that it was based on an identified need, and then bringing in the people over, I mean, a really long period of time from 2013 up until getting the funding in 2019, by which time there was kind of quite a committed group of people that were there and prepared to carry that on and keep that going. I mentioned the DWP, and that the person who was involved was, quite a high level manager within the job centres across Leeds. So she was able to help us access and maintain those links. And similarly with the library's involvement, that was somebody who was, a senior manager who could then kind of help us to get the information down to the level where it needed to be. So I guess just building it up over a really long period of time And then, of course, now that we've got the funding and there are paid workers in the organisation, that, you know, the job role is development worker, and that really is about developing and maintaining those links. And I think, you know, the big sell to people is that they can see the benefit of having the website there.
Thank you very much, Catherine. Sorry to cut you off, but we are coming to the close of the session. But I think a couple of really important points there about the time, the effort that's needed over time and at different levels to really do that effectively. So just in terms of signposting, we are going to take another break away from the screens now. So as Daniela's posted in chat, the next plenary session will be back on the same Slido link as before at 12:10. And we'll be hearing from Andrew Brownlee about the adult literacy strategy in Ireland, which is well worth sticking around for if you've still got the time, followed by a panel discussion. So do join us for that if you can. In terms of this session, we will be sharing slides and so on. You can expect to see further things coming out from us in terms of partnership working and social prescribing. That work isn't quite ready yet, but will be coming out in the next few weeks. So you've had a bit of a sneak preview this morning. And so we'll share things around with you. Thank you very much to all of our Catherines today for their contributions, and some great questions, points and discussions in the chat there as well. So thank you very much for joining us. We'll let you have a quick break now and hopefully see as many of you back as possible on Slido at 12:10. So thanks very much for now, and see you later on.